They say an empath is soft, too emotional, too forgiving, too understanding. But what nobody tells you is what happens when the kindest soul finally gets betrayed. Because betrayal does not just hurt an empath, it changes them. And the terrifying part? Most people never notice the transformation until it's too late. An empath is the type of person who sees good in people even after being disappointed 100 times. They answer late-night calls. They stay when everyone else leaves. They forgive things they should never forgive. They carry people emotionally while secretly drowning themselves. And the dangerous thing about empaths is that they love with their entire soul. So when someone betrays them, it doesn't feel like simple heartbreak. It feels like the death of trust itself, because empaths don't fake loyalty. They don't pretend to care. When they love you, they make you feel safe, understood, seen. And when the person they protected becomes the same person who destroys them, something inside them breaks in silence. At first, they blame themselves. Maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe I expected too much. Maybe I cared too deeply. That's the curse of an empath. They search for reasons to protect the people who hurt them. Even after being betrayed, they still try to understand the betrayer. And that's exactly why people underestimate them. Because the empath does not explode immediately. They absorb pain quietly. They cry privately. They disappear emotionally before they disappear physically. But one day, the switch happens. And almost nobody is prepared for it. The empath who once begged for honesty suddenly becomes silent. The person who once gave endless chances suddenly stops explaining. The soul that tolerated disrespect suddenly becomes unreachable. Not because they stopped caring, but because they finally realized caring too much was destroying them. See, betrayal teaches an empath something brutal about human nature. It teaches them that some people only love your light while they benefit from it. Some people will drain your kindness like vampires and call it love. Some people will use your forgiveness as permission to hurt you again. And once an empath truly understands this, they never return to who they used to be. That's the part nobody talks about. People think the empath becomes cold. Number. They become selective. Here's a difference. They stop over-explaining, stop chasing, stop trying to convince people to value them. Because betrayal forces them to see a painful truth. The people who truly love you will never require you to destroy yourself to keep them. And when that realization hits an empath, their entire personality changes. Suddenly, the person who always answered messages takes hours to reply. The person who always checked on everyone disappears. The person who tolerated disrespect now walks away in complete silence. No revenge. No screaming. No dramatic goodbye. Just distance. And honestly, that silence is more terrifying than anger. Because when an empath becomes emotionally detached, it means they suffered longer than anyone realized. Most people only notice an empath's value after they're gone. That's the irony. People become addicted to empathy without appreciating the empath. They miss the attention, the emotional safety, the constant understanding, the unconditional presence. But by the time they realize it, the empath has already emotionally buried the relationship in their mind. And once a good empath reaches that stage, reconnecting with them becomes nearly possible, not because they hate you, but because they finally learned to protect themselves. People think betrayal only breaks the heart, but when a good empath is betrayed, it destroys something much deeper than love. It destroys innocence. Because empaths do not love the way normal people love. They attach with their soul. They remember little details nobody else notices. The change in your voice, the sadness behind your smile, the silence between your words. An empath studies people emotionally without even trying, and when they care about you, they make your pain feel like their responsibility. That is why betrayal hits them differently. The average person gets angry. The empath gets shattered internally while pretending to be okay externally. And most people never notice it happening. The empath will still smile, still reply politely, still act calm, but inside, their mind is collapsing. Because the deepest pain for an empath is not being hated. It is realizing the person they protected emotionally was secretly destroying them. That realization changes everything. See, empaths are not weak because they care too much. They are dangerous because they continue to care. Even after being hurt. Most people leave after the first betrayal. An empath stays longer than they should. They try to understand your trauma, your stress, your mood swings, your darkness. They make excuses for behavior that slowly kills them emotionally. And the terrifying part is, they do it out of love. They convince themselves that patience will heal everything, that loyalty will eventually be appreciated, that if they just love harder, things will change. But betrayal teaches them a brutal lesson no one prepared them for. Some people don't heal in the presence of love. Some people abuse it. That truth destroys the empath's reality. Because empaths believe honesty still exists. Real connection still exists. Pure intention still exists. So when someone lies to them, manipulates them, cheats on them, disrespects them, or emotionally abandons them, the empath doesn't just question the relationship. They question humanity itself. Suddenly they start replaying every memory in their head. Was any of it real? Did you ever truly care? Were they loving a person or just an illusion? That mental torture is what slowly transforms them. People think the empath becomes cold, but overnight, number. The transformation happens in silence. It happens after nights of crying without telling anyone. After rereading old messages trying to understand where things changed. After blaming themselves for someone else's betrayal. After begging themselves to stop loving someone who keeps hurting them. Because empaths do something most people never do. They internalize pain. They don't just feel betrayal emotionally. They absorb it psychologically. Every lie becomes self-doubt. Every rejection becomes overthinking. Every broken promise becomes emotional exhaustion. And eventually their nervous system becomes tired of surviving emotional chaos. That's when the shift begins. The empath who once answered instantly starts disappearing. The person who once gave endless emotional energy becomes distant. The soul who once tolerated disrespect suddenly becomes unreadable, and nobody understands why. Because people only noticed the empath when they were giving. Nobody noticed how drained they had become. That's the tragedy of being an empath. People fall in love with your healing energy, but rarely ask what's healing you. So the empath keeps pouring love into empty people until there's almost nothing left inside themselves. And betrayal is the final wound that wakes them up. Not immediately, but slowly, painfully. The empath begins realizing something terrifying. They were loyal to people who were never loyal to them emotionally. That realization feels like emotional death, because once an empath sees the truth clearly, they can never unsee it. They begin remembering every red flag they ignored, every moment their intuition warned them, every disrespect they minimized just to keep peace, and suddenly, guilt turns into clarity. That's when the transformation becomes irreversible. The empath stops begging to be understood, stops chasing closure, stops trying to save relationships that are killing them internally, because betrayal teaches them the hardest lesson of all. Not everyone deserves access to your heart. And when an empath truly learns that lesson, their energy changes forever. You can feel it. The same person who once radiated warmth now feels emotionally guarded. The same person who once trusted easily now studies people carefully. The same person who once tolerated emotional chaos now walks away at the first sign of manipulation, not because they became heartless, because pain forced them to develop boundaries, and boundaries feel offensive to people who benefited from the empath having none. That's why toxic people often call the healed empath different. Of course they're different. You force them to learn survival emotionally. You forced a soft soul to become emotionally disciplined. And honestly, that transformation is heartbreaking, because deep down the empath never wanted to become guarded. They wanted consistency, honesty, safety, reciprocation. But betrayal changes the way a person sees love forever, especially an empath. Now they overanalyze kindness because they fear hidden intentions. They hesitate before trusting compliments. They question loyalty even when someone seems genuine, not because they enjoy negativity, because experience taught them how easily beautiful words can hide ugly motives. That's what betrayal does to a pure heart. It makes them afraid of the very thing they once gave freely. Love, and the worst part, most people only realize the empath's value after the transformation happens, after the warmth disappears, after the emotional support appears, after the constant forgiveness disappears, suddenly people miss the person they took for granted. But by then, the empath has already suffered too much internally to return to who they used to be. Because betrayal matures an empath in the most painful way possible. It teaches them that being needed is not the same as being loved, that being emotionally available to everyone can become self-destruction, that some people will consume your light without ever protecting yours. And once an empath understands this deeply, their entire soul evolves. Now they choose peace over attachment, distance over disrespect, solitude over fake connection. And strangely enough, that's when they finally become powerful. Because the betrayed empath eventually stops searching for validation from people who failed to value them. They stop shrinking themselves to keep others comfortable. Stop sacrificing mental peace just to avoid losing people. Stop abandoning themselves for relationships built on one-sided loyalty. For the first time in their life, they choose themselves, and that moment changes everything internally. Now their kindness has standards. Their love has limits. Therefore, gratitude has wisdom attached to it. That's why you should never underestimate a betrayed empath. The pain may break them temporarily, but eventually it rebuilds them into someone emotionally untouchable. Someone calmer, sharper, more aware. Someone who can recognize fake energy within seconds because betrayal trained their intuition to survive. And once an empath reaches that stage, they stop fearing abandonment because they already survived the worst pain possible, giving their purest love to someone who treated it like it was ordinary. The most dangerous thing about an empath is not their emotions, it's their silence. Because when most people get hurt, they react immediately. They scream. They argue. They seek revenge. They want the world to see their pain. But an empath, they go quiet. And that silence hides a storm nobody can imagine. See, empaths are not naturally confrontational. They don't enjoy conflict. They don't enjoy hurting people back. Even after being disrespected, their first instinct is still understanding. That's why they suffer in silence longer than anyone realizes. While everyone thinks the empath is fine, they are internally fighting emotional wars no body can see. They replay conversations in their head at 3 a.m., analyze every word, every tone change, every cold response, every moment they felt unwanted but ignored their intuition just to keep the connection alive. Because empaths don't detach quickly. They stay emotionally loyal even after the relationship becomes painful. And honestly, that's what destroys them. They keep hoping things will go back to how they used to be. They keep remembering the good version of someone while suffering through the bad version. They hold on to potential while reality slowly breaks their spirit. And while all this is happening, they remain silent. That's what people misunderstand. The empath's silence is not weakness. It is emotional overload. They are feeling too much at once: disappointment, confusion, grief, love, anger, attachment, all crashing into their mind at the same time. And instead of exploding outwardly, the empath collapses inwardly. That is why their silence feels so heavy. Because behind that quiet behavior is someone mentally exhausting themselves, trying to save a connection that is already dying. Most people never see this phase. They only notice the empath once the energy channel is open. Gestures, once the long messages stop, once the emotional effort disappears, once the empath no longer reacts. And by then, it's already too late. Because when an empath stops reacting emotionally, something serious has happened internally. It means exhaustion replaced hope. Read that again. Exhaustion replaced hope. That is one of the saddest emotional transformations a human being can experience. Because empaths are fighters when they truly love someone. They will communicate repeatedly, forgive repeatedly, stay loyal repeatedly, even while being emotionally drained. But eventually, every empath reaches a breaking point, a moment where their soul becomes too tired to keep bleeding for people who don't appreciate them. And when that moment arrives, their silence becomes terrifyingly calm. No drama, no begging, no emotional speeches, just distance. Cold distance, the kind of silence that makes people suddenly realize how much emotional energy the empath was carrying the entire time. See, people become addicted to empaths without understanding it. They get used to the support. the empathy, the reassurance, the deep emotional attention. So when the empath suddenly goes silent, it feels like key warmth disappeared from the relationship itself, and that silence creates panic. Because now the other person is forced to experience the emotional emptiness the empath felt for months. That's the irony. Nobody notices an empath drowning until they stop saving everyone else. And once the empath emotionally disconnects, reconnecting with them becomes almost impossible. Not because they stopped loving, because they finally accepted reality. That acceptance changes their entire energy. Now they stop explaining themselves to people committed to misunderstanding them. Stop defending their worth to emotionally unavailable people. Stop chasing effort from people who only give attention when convenient. And the silence becomes permanent. That's what scares people the most. An empath can tolerate pain for a very long time, but once they emotionally let go, they rarely come back the same. Because silence is how empaths grieve. Not publicly, internally. They disappear emotionally before they disappear physically, long before the breakup, long before the final goodbye, long before anyone realizes what's happening. The empath is already mourning the relationship quietly inside themselves. That's why when they finally leave, they often look calm, but that calmness is misunderstood. People think the empath moved on fast. They suffered silently for so long that by the time they left, the grieving process was already completed internally. And honestly, that's one of the darkest forms of pain imaginable. Smiling while your heart slowly detaches from someone you once loved deeply. Pretending everything is okay while emotionally collapsing in private. Trying to save a relationship while secretly feeling your soul becoming exhausted. That's the empath's reality. And the scariest part? Most people never apologize until they experience the empath's absence. Because presence is easy to underestimate, until it disappears. Suddenly, the late-night conversations are gone. The emotional safety is gone, the constant understanding is gone, and people begin realizing the empath was carrying the emotional depth of the entire relationship alone. But by then, the empath has changed. Now their silence no longer comes from sadness, it comes from clarity. That is the transformation nobody talks about. At first, the empath stays silent because they are hurt. Later, they stay silent because they are hurt. They finally see the truth clearly. They realize some people only value you when they fear losing access to you. Some people only give effort after emotional damage has already been done. Some people never appreciated loyalty until the loyalty disappeared. And once an empath understands this deeply, they stop begging for love completely. That silence becomes self-respect. Now they choose peace over emotional chaos, distance over manipulation, stillness over draining conversations. And strangely enough, that silence becomes powerful. Because for the first time in their life, the empath stops abandoning themselves to keep others comfortable. They stop over-explaining boundaries. Stop feeling guilty for protecting their energy. Stop tolerating emotional inconsistency. And the people who once ignored their pain suddenly feel the loss intensely. Because an empath's energy is irreplaceable. You can find attention anywhere, attraction anywhere, temporary people anywhere. But genuine emotional understanding, that is rare, very rare. And when someone destroys that kind of connection through betrayal, lies, disrespect, or emotional neglect, they usually don't understand what they lost until the empath becomes silent permanently. That's why the empath's silence feels haunting, because it carries every unspoken disappointment, every hidden tear, every ignored wound, every moment they chose loyalty while being emotionally destroyed inside. Their silence speaks what words never could. It says, "I tried longer than you'll ever understand. I loved deeper than you deserved. I stayed while slowly breaking inside, and now I'm finally choosing myself." That kind of silence changes people. Because deep down, everyone knows when they've lost someone genuinely rare. And a good empath becomes rare the moment pain teaches them that not everyone deserves access to their heart. A healed empath is one of the most powerful people you will ever meet, not because they became colder, because they survived things that were supposed to destroy them emotionally. See, most people think healing means returning to who you used to be, but that's not what happens to an empath. A betrayed empath never becomes the same person again. The innocence disappears. The blind trust disappears. The habit of giving unlimited chances disappears. And honestly, that transformation is painful because they never wanted to become guarded. They wanted honesty, consistency, real love, safe connection. But pain forced them to evolve. And once an empath begins healing, something terrifying starts happening internally. They stop needing validation from people who once controlled their emotions. That changes everything. Now the same person who used to overthink rejection starts feeling peaceful alone. The same person who once feared losing people suddenly becomes comfortable walking away. The same soul who tolerated emotional chaos begins protecting their peace like survival depends on it, because now they understand something most people never learn. Not everyone deserves access to your energy. That realization becomes the foundation of their power. See, before healing, the empath thought love meant sacrifice, overgiving, over-explaining, over-forgiving. They believed enduring pain proved loyalty. But healing rewires their entire understanding of relationships. Now they realize real love does not constantly drain your nervous system. Real love does not leave you emotionally confused every night. Real love does not make you question your worth repeatedly. And once an empath fully understands this truth, they stop romanticizing suffering. That's when their standards become powerful. Now they pay attention to actions instead of words, consistency instead of promises, energy instead of appearances. Because betrayal trained their intuition to recognize emotional danger early. That's why healed empaths become extremely hard to manipulate. Not because they became emotionless, because pain taught them pattern recognition. Now they notice fake kindness immediately, forced loyalty immediately, hidden intentions immediately. The same sensitivity that once made them vulnerable now becomes their greatest strength. And honestly, that scares people, because the healed empath no longer ignores red flags just to keep people around. Now they can walk away from anyone who disturbs their peace emotionally, without guilt. That is real power. Most people are terrified of losing others. A healed empath becomes terrified of losing themselves again. There's a difference. Before healing, they abandoned themselves for love, stayed too long, forgave too much, excused behavior that slowly destroyed their confidence. But after healing, they stopped betraying themselves to keep relationships alive. And the energy shift becomes impossible to ignore. Now they speak differently, move differently, love differently, calmer, sharper, more intentional. Not because pain made them bitter, because pain made them aware. That awareness changes everything internally. The healed empath no longer chases attention, no longer begs to be chosen, no longer shrinks themselves to make toxic people comfortable. Because healing teaches them that their worth does not decrease when someone fails to appreciate it. That lesson frees them emotionally. Now rejection no longer destroys them. Distance no longer terrifies them. Loneliness no longer feels like punishment, because they finally understand solitude is safer than fake connection. And honestly, that realization changes an empath forever. Now they would rather sit alone in peace than surround themselves with people who drain their spirit. That's why healed empaths often become quieter, not weak, selective. They stop forcing conversations, stop forcing relationships, stop forcing emotional availability from unavailable people, and suddenly their energy becomes rare, mysterious, almost intimidating, because they no longer carry desperation inside them. See, desperation disappears when self-respect is born, and healed empaths develop self-respect through pain. Pain becomes their teacher. Every betrayal teaches boundaries. Every disappointment teaches awareness. Every heartbreak teaches emotional discipline. Until eventually the empath transforms into someone almost unrecognizable. The same person who once cried over abandonment now calmly lets people leave. The same person who once begged for closure now walks away silently. The same person who once tolerated emotional games now cuts off access instantly. That transformation shocks people, especially the ones who underestimated them. Because many people mistake kindness for weakness. They think the empath will always stay, always forgive, always understand. But healing changes the empath's relationship with tolerance. Now they understand that endless understanding without boundaries becomes self-destruction. So they stop overextending themselves emotionally. And for the first time in their life, they choose balance. That's when life starts changing for them. Their mental peace improves. Their confidence returns. Their anxiety decreases because they are no longer emotionally attached to people who constantly wound them. That emotional freedom feels almost unreal to a healed empath. Imagine carrying emotional pain for years, then finally realizing you are allowed to protect yourself, allowed to say no, allowed to leave, allowed to outgrow people who disrespect you. That realization feels like rebirth. And once an empath experiences that level of inner peace, they never willingly return to emotional chaos again, because healing makes them addicted to peace. Now they protect their energy carefully, protect their time carefully, protect their heart carefully. Not everyone gains access anymore. And that's exactly why healed empaths become so powerful in relationships. They no longer fall in love with potential. They fall in love with consistency. That single change saves them from endless suffering. Now they stop trying to rescue broken people who refuse to heal themselves. Stop trying to earn love through sacrifice. Stop believing pain is proof of connection. Instead, they begin choosing relationships that feel emotionally safe, mutual respect, mutual effort, mutual loyalty, healthy love, something many empaths never experienced before healing. And the beautiful part. Once healed, the empath's kindness returns, but differently. Now it has boundaries attached to it, wisdom attached to it, self-respect attached to it. That's what makes healed empaths unstoppable. They remain kind without becoming naive, loving without becoming self-destructive, open-hearted without abandoning their intuition. And honestly, that balance is rare, very rare, because most people either become cold after pain or remain trapped in unhealthy patterns forever. But the healed empath becomes something else entirely. Strong without cruelty, soft without weakness, emotionally intelligent without losing their humanity. That is true evolution. And the people who once betrayed them often become shocked by the transformation, because they expected the empath to stay broken. Instead, the pain upgraded them. Now the empath no longer fears abandonment because they learned how to survive loneliness, no longer fears rejection because they discovered their worth internally, no longer fears losing toxic people because peace became more valuable than attachment. That's why healed empaths become emotionally unstoppable. Not because life stopped hurting them, because they finally stopped allowing pain to define their value. Now they understand something powerful. Being deeply loving was never their weakness. Giving that love to the wrong people was. And once an empath truly understands that lesson, they stop begging the world to love them correctly. They start loving themselves correctly first.